Welcome back, dear viewers. Now it's time for our daily press review, and we're joined here in the studio with Mr. Mohamed Sheta, a media expert. Good morning.
A very good morning to you and to your viewers.
And we start off from الأهم newspaper, and we read the following headline: intensive supervision of the prices of the food goods. President gave his directives regarding easing the burdens of the low-income brackets of youth. President Fattah al-Sisi met with Minister of Supply and Internal Trade Khalid Hanafi. The aim of the meeting was to discuss the ministry's efforts in providing citizens with needs of basic commodities during the month of Ramadan. During the meeting, President al-Sisi expressed his concern over the low-income bracket. Al-Sisi instructed the concerned parties to keep an eye on lowering their commodities prices and increasing their quality. For his part, the Minister of Supply the ministry has managed to increase the amount of subsidies provided by citizens by 20% in response to President al-Sisi's directives. So let's first focus on the government's efforts to ease the burdens of low-income brackets and the employment of youth.
Well, actually, of course, this is a very important step because reducing the cost of the commodities and the prices of the commodities is extremely important, not only of the food products, but actually of all the because everything, all the prices have risen significantly during the past couple of months, actually, in Egypt. Many traders and many importers claim that it is because of the shortage of the foreign currency, which is in many cases not related, because if you have local food products produced in Egypt, then it has not very much to do with the shortage of the US dollar. On the other hand, there are other measures which the government should take. For example, transportation is a very important role, not only for food products, but for any products, actually. And we need to reduce the cost of transportation all over Egypt significantly and increase the mobility, not of the food transportation, but also of the mobility of the people themselves, because this is, of course, part of the prices. If you have your workers traveling from one part of the city or from one city to another, and it costs you a certain amount of money, the lower this amount is, the lower the prices of your products can be. So I think this is a very important step in reducing the transportation costs, and this can be achieved actually by opening the import on several means of transportation. For example, cars, for example. We have a huge customs fees on cars, and I think it's very important that the government starts allowing the import of used cars, because this will definitely reduce the cost of the cars. They should also have a look at the prices of the service centers, because I think there is kind of an exploitation of the Egyptian consumer and of course of the Egyptian companies when they go, for example, go service their buses or go service their trucks or their passenger cars. And this all the day to an increase of the transport costs and thus also the increase of the food prices.
Actually,
as well.
There is a huge increase in the prices of cars themselves.
It's inhumane, actually. It is, and it's unexplainable why actually the so-called Consumer Protection Agency is not taking a serious steps toward this exploitation of most of the car importers and car dealers. And I think, like I said in a previous episode, if the government opens the import for used cars, it will first of all, it will reduce the demand for US dollars, because instead of, for example, importing 200,000 cars with an amount of $4 billion US dollars, we will only import half of those cars as used and the other half of those cars as new cars, and this will reduce the need for at least $1 billion US dollars per year. And after that, the government can actually make an additional income or revenue of at least 1 billion Egyptian pounds when implementing a so-called roadworthiness test for those coming from Europe or any other parts of the world. So I think it's a win-win situation. We will reduce the level of pollution. So this is very good for the environment. We will reduce the numbers of accidents because most of the cars, the used cars which are coming for your room, have very, very high active and passive safety features, unlike the locally assembled cars here in Egypt, which actually do not have any safety features, or the Chinese cars we get from China also lack all the important active and passive safety features.
Okay, and from Al-Masri اليوم we read the following headline: the governor of Daqahliya, Hussein Eddin Imam, says to the paper, El-Sisi inaugurates projects worth billions in the governorate. The governor says the head of state is to inaugurate mega projects during his visit to the province. The governor said that corruption is more dangerous than terrorism, and there is a lobby that is preventing the services reaching the citizens. And 13 governors in the list of the reshuffle after the lesser Byram. So how do you read this statement by the governor of the Qahliya, as he says corruption is more dangerous than terrorism?
Well, actually, this is everywhere, because corruption will lead to a increase of dissatisfaction among larger parts of the citizens,
yes.
and this will automatically also lead to matters being not transparent, and at the end of the day, this will lead to maybe criminal. I mean, corruption is part of is a huge criminal act, actually, and consequently this will sooner or later lead, yes, also to people becoming more violent and not respecting the law, and of course there will be some groups which will try to use and make benefit out of this dissatisfaction among certain groups of people, and maybe use them kind of attract them in order to join them in doing their terrorist acts. I'm very happy that the governor of the Qahliya announced that they're inaugurating projects worth of billions of pounds. If I'm not mistaken, the Qahliya is the third largest city, yes, in Egypt after Cairo, the Greater Cairo, and Alexandria. So I think the last number I heard, that there are like 6 million people living in, yes, the Qahliya. So this is a huge number, and I think it's very important to provide all these young people there. I go very often to the Qahliya, actually, and to Al Mansoura, and I see there is quite a huge unemployment scene, which you see actually on the road when you're driving there. You see lots of young people sitting on the cafes and not working during daytime. So I think such projects will definitely be very helpful for the community there. And the other thing is the 13 governors which are supposed to be reshuffled. I think we not only need to reshuffle the governors, but we also need to reshuffle some ministers, actually, yes, as well. I think some ministers or some ministries need to have a much more active minister, actually. And what we need most importantly, we're just talking about the prices of commodities. We need a minister for consumer protection. The so-called Consumer Protection Agency is not a very effective agency, actually, and it's definitely not, yes, it's completely overstrained, of course, and it's not enough covering all the problems we have in Egypt. We need a very young, we need a dynamic, we need an educated, and we need a very professional minister, yes, for consumer protection, like it is everywhere else in the world. Okay, and back to Al-Ahram newspaper, and we read Ministry denounces the Qatari statements regarding the verdict in the espionage case. In its first comment, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry denounced the statement that was issued by the Qatari Foreign Ministry, which denounced the verdict issued by the Cairo Criminal Court in the case known as the espionage of Qatar. And still with the same issue from Al-Masri Al-Yom newspaper, and we read the House of Representatives attacks the statement regarding the condemnation of Morsi. A number of the members of the Arab Affairs Committee and the House of Representatives launched an attack on the statement that was issued by Qatar's Foreign Ministry regarding the condemnation of Morsi in the espionage case. And still with the same issue, and from Al-Yom As-Saba, we read its main banner, Doha defends its agents, Mohamed and his spies in the espionage case, and the Foreign Ministry says the Egyptian people shall never forget those who did them wrong, and the Qatari stance is a result of its ignorance of the history of the judiciary. Now, dear viewers, we'll have a report on this issue, so stay tuned.
Qatar have renewed their animosity, trading harsh statements over the sentencing to death by the Cairo Criminal Court of 6 people, including 2 Al Jazeera employees, for passing Egyptian documents related to national security to Qatar and the Doha-based TV network during the rule of deposed Mohamed Morsi. Relations between Egypt and Qatar have been tense and suspicious since Morsi who enjoyed the support of the tiny but super-rich Gulf nation throughout his 1 year in office, was deposed in July 2013. Egypt says Qatar endangers its national security by supporting terrorist groups, including Morsi's Brotherhood, which is now banned in Egypt and has been declared a terrorist group by the government. Cairo also accuses the Doha-based Al Jazeera network of of the Brotherhood and other groups. Saturday's verdicts, which can be appealed, have further inflamed tensions. In a statement on Qatar's state news agency late Saturday, the foreign ministry said the verdicts did not help in consolidating ties between the two countries. Egypt's foreign ministry fired back, saying the country's judiciary was independent and professional. Spokesman Ahmed Abu Zaid said it was not surprising to see such comments from a government that had resources and efforts over the past years to mobilize its media mouthpieces to be hostile to the people of Egypt and its state and institutions. The case involved a total of 11 defendants, of whom 7, including Morsi, are in custody.
Now, Mr. Sheta, how did the Qatari reaction to the verdict and the foreign ministry stance regarding the Qatari statement?
Well, I'm not actually surprised by the statements of the
Yes.
Qatari representatives. Of course, they want to show to the world that they are with human rights and everything,
Yes.
and that they're against the verdicts. And I think this is definitely an internal issue of Egypt, and where not one single country is actually allowed to really judge it, because I've never heard about any country, for example, in the GCC a region commenting on court verdicts in another GCC country, for example. You've never seen Qatar commenting on a court verdict in the UAE, for example, or in Saudi Arabia. So I think there was no need for the Qatari government or for the Qatari representatives to really push that conflict into make it even more complicated between Qatar and Egypt. And of course the reply of the Egyptian government was also expected, and I think it is now the role of the Egyptian media, especially the state-owned media, to reply to this, because I mean Al Jazeera is also state-owned, is a state-owned media organization by the Qatari government, and they speak for them. So I think it's now up to the Egyptian media to tackle this if they want to really enlarge this conflict. But I think maybe we should just ignore them, or the Egyptian media should just ignore them and just continue with their work and really ignore them.
Yes. Yeah, and back to Al-Ahram newspaper, and we read the following headline, starting the analysis of 2 black boxes of the doomed plane. Investigators begin analyzing the 2 damaged black boxes from Egypt Air flight MS-804 as they seek to explain why the plane plunged into the sea, killing all 66 people on board. More about the analysis of the 2 black boxes of Egypt Air plane in the following report.
Investigators have begun examining the black box flight recorders of an Egypt Air plane that crashed into the Mediterranean last month, hoping to establish the cause of the disaster. The Airbus A320 operating flight MS-804 from Paris to Cairo disappeared their screens between the Greek island of Crete and the north coast of Egypt on May 19. 66 people were on board. A vast search operation was launched, finding debris and pieces of the plane's wreckage at the bottom of the Mediterranean before the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered last week. Egypt's Civil Aviation Authority said the Egypt-led investigative committee began examining the so-called black boxes on Saturday in the presence of representatives from France and the United States, where the engine was made. It added that both of the devices were damaged and had to be raised from the seabed in several stages. It said their memory units were removed at the Civil Aviation Ministry's labs in Cairo and were undergoing testing. The data on them is to be unloaded before it is analyzed in a procedure that is expected to last several weeks. If badly damaged, the black boxes would be sent abroad for repairs, otherwise the work could be done in Egypt. Investigators have said it is too early to determine what caused the plane to crash, although a terror attack has not been ruled out. France's Aviation Safety Agency has said the aircraft transmitted automated messages indicating smoke in the cabin and a fault in the flight control unit minutes before it disappeared. On Monday, Egyptian investigators confirmed the aircraft had made a 90-degree left turn followed by a 360-degree turn to the right before hitting the sea. The passengers on the plane were 30 Egyptians, 15 French citizens, 2 Iraqis, 2 Canadians, and citizens from Algeria, Belgium, Britain, Chad, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, and Sudan. They included a boy and 2 babies. 7 crew and 3 security personnel were also on board.
So back to you, Mr. Sheta. In your opinion, how long will it take to analyze the 2 black boxes?
Well, actually, it could take up to a couple of months, actually, depending on the damage which was done to the black box recorders. On another note, of course, this can happen to any airline, but nevertheless, I think Egypt Air really needs to improve their customer service a little bit more. We are trying to improve tourism on different levels, and there was a reshuffle we talked about earlier about the governance. I think we might even need a new Minister of Tourism as well, and maybe even a new president for Egypt Air, because for example, I was traveling to Jordan on a business trip a couple of weeks ago, and they simply canceled the 5 a.m. flight without even notifying the customers. You know, so it's actually unacceptable. A friend of mine, she was working at the World Food Program. They had a training session in El Gouna at the Red Sea, and she had a connecting flight to Paris. And when she arrived at the airport at Hurghada to catch the flight to Cairo in order to catch the connecting flight to Paris, she found out that the flight was also cancelled without being notified. You know, so but thankfully she had a time gap which allowed her to take a taxi from Hurghada to Cairo. But even Egypt Air didn't care to organize this taxi. She had to organize it by herself. So I think Egypt Air needs to wake up a little bit and try to offer a little bit more customer service. So in order so that people would even try to support them. You know, I refused to take a Jordanian plane on that day, although there was one in after 5 hours, and I had the right that Egypt Air would book a flight on this Jordanian airline, and they would have needed to pay at least 5,000 or 6,000 pounds, you know. And I refused, and I said, no, I'm going to take the 5 p.m. flight with Egypt Air in order to support them. But nevertheless, they should really try to improve their customer service a little bit.
Okay, Mr. Mohamed Sheta, media expert, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Now, dear viewers, we'll go for a short break with the top stories, so stay tuned.